I am not one for optimism, but is the marriage between Christian nationalism and the political right showing some cracks? Hi, I'm Britt Hartley. I'm a scholar of religion. I lost my faith in theology school, as one does, and I live my life in such a way that even if religion wins and authoritarianism wins, I'm focused on the story I'm writing with my life, what I can do, the ways that I reduce suffering, the ways that I protest. So before you think I've gone all dewy-eyed, I'm not usually one for optimism. That's not how I operate. But I am seeing something here, guys. So let's talk about what in America is our royal marriage, which is the marriage between Christian nationalism and the political right, because this marriage is looking rocky. I'm seeing some signs. So let's talk about it. First, we've got the viral TikTok public refusal by churches to help a mother get access to formula. I had a whole video on that, I think 2 weeks ago. It's still going, by the way. This experiment was 40 churches being called by a mother saying that she needed formula, not just money, I just need formula. My baby's hungry. And the vast majority said no. And what is fascinating is the ones that said no are experiencing huge public backlash. The worst ones have, called the experimenter a witch. Another one came out with a statement where they play the persecution card that they're being persecuted for Christ's sake and all of that. And it's like, hey, this is just natural consequences because you didn't want to help a starving child. And the churches that did help got flooded with donations. And this is one of those rare times one of these rare times in the world where the good guys won and the bad guys didn't. The bad guys, the churches who said no to the mother wanting formula for her baby, some of them are being investigated. And because people are so wonderfully petty, they start looking at the books and realizing, hey, there's some shady stuff going on. And in the history of religion, we've just never had this kind of public power where, like, if you don't help the poor and then, you go viral and you have to shut down all the comments and the Google reviews of your church because you're just getting massacred in the court of public opinion. And not a single church that said no said, hey, we could do better to be more like Jesus. Not one has made a statement like that. And the kids on TikTok are watching. And so, yeah, I just loved this rare moment where the good guys got donations and the ones who said no are, having to shut down their Facebook or their Google reviews and are really losing a lot of credibility. Second thing that I'm watching, we have these pastors that are rebelling against MAGA expectations. And even I, as an atheist, have so much respect for these pastors. We have a pastor in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, where I live. I don't live in Coeur d'Alene, I live in Boise, but I live in Idaho, reported that several elders and longtime members demanded that he explicitly endorse Trump from the pulpit. When he refused, they warned that he would pull their their tithing, that they would vote to remove him, that they would, leave the church en masse. And he resigned and wrote publicly that his church had stopped being a church and had become a political action committee with hymns. His resignation letter also went viral on Facebook, and later TikTok clips analyzing it hit millions of views also. We have a youth pastor and worship leader from a large evangelical church in Texas posting on TikTok explaining why he left. There were members pressuring him to celebrate January 6th. Parents complained that he wasn't doing enough to teach kids to fight the culture war. Leadership told him that staying neutral is taking sides. Several families said they wouldn't give money unless sermons addressed election fraud and border invasion. His video again went viral with hundreds of thousands of views and comments from Christians saying this happened at my church too. We have a Baptist pastor in Georgia documented with permission a board meeting where deacons insisted that he condemned Democrats as demonic, that they host voter registration drives only for Republicans, allow Turning Point speakers to preach on Sundays. And when he declined, the board said that they would evaluate his employment. So he posted a long explanation on YouTube titled Why I Can't Preach MAGA Christianity, which went viral, at least in Exvangelical circles. There's a North Carolina pastor who said that he tried to preach a sermon purely about the Beatitudes, like we're just doing what Jesus said. And after congregants confronted him in the lobby saying, you sound woke now, we pay you to teach truth, not liberal nonsense, which is funny to hear. If you won't take a stand, we'll take our money somewhere else. And then he posted this very like tearful reflection video explaining the moment and why he feared for the future of the church. Millions of views, thousands of people again saying this happened at my church too. So I could go on, but each of these cases is the same story from a different town, that churches are splitting up from the inside, not because people are becoming more liberal necessarily, but because politics has replaced faith, and the pastors who are resisting it are being punished. And so we've known for about the past 10 years in the data that American religion is no longer considered theological. Like no one seems to be debating anymore real theology, Catholics versus Protestants, which baptisms is God into this week, is God Trinitarian or not? Like we're not really in America doing any form of theology anymore. Politics is our religion, and religions have had to take one side or the other, sometimes even splitting in half over a single issue like gay marriage. In fact, the only church that is currently able to have half Republicans and half Democrats in a congregation and not blow up over it is the Catholics. And there's two main reasons for this. One reason is because they're so highly liturgical. It's the same ritual you do, so it's not dependent on the charisma or politics of the bishop and sermons. And then the other reason is that the power of the Catholic Church isn't here. It's in Italy. And so once in a while, the Catholic Church here will start to get political. Like someone will try not to give the sacrament to someone pro-choice in government, things like that. And then the Vatican will send messages or send people sometimes and basically say like, hey guys, knock it off. And they do. They knock it off. Like they've got their own power struggles in Rome. But in America, really, they are the only church that has not fully had to pick a side in our political war because their power structure is not here. Their power structure is elsewhere, and they're doing liturgy. So they're able to kind of loosely hold what we're seeing, which is Democrat, Latino Catholics, and white kind of more MAGA Catholics, and they're able a little bit to be able to be in the same congregation, but only because the Vatican will tell them to knock it off if they get too political, and because the liturgy is the same wherever you go. But another sign of cracks that I'm seeing is that Donald Trump is just not looking too Christian lately, like the selling the Bibles, the gold statues of Trump, calling to King Trump David. I mean, there were Christians who were calling that out in his first term, but now with the Epstein files, it's just so blatant that this is not God's greatest soldier. And what used to be whispered dissent, as far as like maybe he's not the best person sometimes, and that would be whispered, is now very public. And so I feel like in this term, Christian leaders, not just liberals, not just secular critics, but pastors, theologian, and Christian leaders in this second term are more openly saying that this movement has gone too far. And you can feel the embarrassment setting in. You can feel that the moral mental gymnastics are just not landing anymore in trying to make Trump Jesus, especially with Epstein file stuff. We have Russell Moore, who is the former president of the Southern Baptist Church. He left the Southern Baptist Church because of Trumpism and abuse cover-ups, and he now warns Christian nationalism that they are in a golden calf moment, and that Trump has become, the cult of personality replacing Christ. And that was very big for him to say as the former president of the SBC. We have the Christianity Today editorial board. They have published multiple editorials calling Trump morally unfit for office. And their editor-in-chief recently wrote that Christian Trump support has become a crisis. We have Phil Vischer, who is the creator of VeggieTales, very outspoken recently that Christians are being discipled by political propaganda more than the Bible. He's criticized Trump repeatedly for moral and theological corruption. So even the VeggieTales are like, this is too much for me. And so Christians who defended him in 2016 and 2020 are now publicly stepping back and saying, this isn't Christian, this is idolatry, I can't defend him to my kids anymore. This is maybe not the man that we were told God anointed. And TikTok and YouTube videos are full of now Christians, like, of course, liberals have been critical of him from the beginning, but Christians who are now saying, I stayed quiet for years, I gave this a chance, but I'm done. And when you hear commentators like Megyn Kelly say that a 15-year-old isn't really a child, you can just feel in that statement how far we are from anything that Jesus taught. Like, Jesus's strongest recorded warning is about harming children. He literally said it's going to be better that a millstone is tied to your neck and that you be thrown into the sea than you have hurt one of these little ones. That's how serious he was. So when Christians start minimizing the ages of Epstein victims to protect a politician, you can just see how inverted the moral compass has become, and it's starting to fall apart, and people are starting to, who supported him in the first term, now say that they can't support him now. So simply put, it is getting too difficult to defend Trump as the representative of Christianity. Now, for me, that was easy for me to say this is not the best representative of Christianity, but finally I think we're getting more movement within Christianity saying I don't like where this is going. Another huge crack in this marriage is the split that's happening over the immigration issue and ICE. Because if churches have always done one thing, they have always been a refuge. They shelter runaway slaves. They hide Jews in Europe. They protect undocumented immigrants in the 80s sanctuary movement. They ran shelters. They built orphanages. They opened kitchens. They move heaven and earth to take care of the stranger. At their best, this is what churches do, because that's literally, what Jesus tells you to do. But now that immigration has become a political wedge issue, you can see this massive tension inside Christianity about whether to follow the gospel when it comes to how we treat immigrants or the GOP, and the cracks are very obvious. In 2020, ICE began targeting churches offering sanctuary, something that past organizations and administrations would have avoided out of respect for religious freedom. And so now we have churches being surrounded by protesters, and then congregations being split, some saying that we need to turn in these illegals, some saying this is what churches do, we defend people who are here for political refuge. And so congregations are split over this ICE issue. Pastors are receiving death threats for sheltering families with children. One Colorado mom sheltered a mom for 3 years to prevent deportation, and the pastor said that he lost a third of his members for choosing compassion over the law. But other Christians from all over the world donated money, food, and volunteers, and both sides, will call themselves follower of Jesus. But this ICE thing is really splitting up Christians. Something that I saw this week, this isn't even in my notes, I just made a TikTok video about this, was a Catholic church that had, a nativity scene. And instead of Jesus being there, they took Jesus out of the manger and they had a poster that says ICE was here. And as a protest for how ICE is treating people, essentially. And so it's interesting to see that some people said that this was too political and too far. But this Catholic church also got a lot of donated money, food, and volunteers because people saw that they were saying something. They were doing what Jesus would do, which is, to treat people well, even if they come from somewhere else, right? Even Franklin Graham, one of the most conservative public Christians, criticized the government for separating families, and it shocked his own base. Lest we forget, he was the one who said, I believe God put Donald Trump in the White House for a reason. But he said that, and he also said that Christians who didn't vote for Trump were being deceived by Satan. But even Franklin Graham, drew the line at ICE coming into churches to take people and separate families who were being offered sanctuary. Even he said that that was too far. Then we have the many sex abuse scandals. We have Robert Morris, who was the founding pastor of Gateway Church in Texas. He was listed as a faith advisor to Donald Trump. He was indicted in 2025 on 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child. The child was 12 years old, by the way. And in October of this year, he pled guilty to the charges. But of course, he tried to use the atonement to say he's made mistakes, but God has forgiven him. And I will stand on I will die on the hill that the atonement helps perpetrators and never victims. The atonement can help perpetrators say, that sin was taken care of between me and God, but did it help the 12-year-old? Do we have any evidence to show that the atonement is helpful for rewiring the brain after trauma when you're 12 years old? No. We have evidence that shows that it helps as a ritual when you want to put something behind you, but that helps perpetrators. And so this is why I am so anti-atonement, is because like, I know that this is not from Jesus if this thing helps perpetrators and not victims. It just doesn't work for victims. So I don't care for this atonement messaging. We also have a movement now in publishing from Christians that's really picked up, specifically 2023 to 2025. This one I just got in the mail, but we have a ton of books from Christians critiquing Christian nationalism and attempting to reclaim Christianity. Basically, anyone who still has some sliver of respect in Christianity is writing a book about how Christian nationalism is ruining Christianity. We have American Idolatry, How Christian Nationalism Betrays the Gospel, which was a 2024 analysis on how Christian nationalism corrupts the gospel, turns faith into an idol, all that kind of stuff. The False White Gospel, Rejecting Christian Nationalism, Reclaiming True Faith and Refounding Democracy, How to End Christian Nationalism, which was a practical and urgent guide for 2025 for Christians alarmed by the rising tide of nationalism. The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, which is dismantling the myth that America was founded as a Christian nation. Separation of Church and Hate is one that I just got sent to me. Very important recent book in pushing back against Christian nationalism from within the Christian tradition itself. It was written by Nathan Empsall, an Episcopal priest and executive director of Faithful America. And his book argues that Christianity has been hijacked by political extremist voices who preach fear and exclusion and political domination in the name of Jesus. So 24 and 25, especially, the publishing world has clearly responded to the rise of Christian nationalism with this wave of critical and often deeply Christian, sometimes deeply personal literature. And these works aren't primarily written for secularists or liberals, by secularists or liberals. For many of them, their target audience are believers who are wrestling with what it means to follow Jesus, amid this rise of religious authoritarianism and identity politics. So you get the picture. There's some cracks showing. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that the older generations are denouncing Trump and Christianity? No. Not going to happen. Historically, it never happens. Even after the Holocaust, when you show these people, like these older Nazis, like what has happened here, like you don't get people who are 60 plus who are entrenched in this to change their mind. It's so rare in the data. Brains just don't change very much at that age. So is the older generation waking up to MAGA and denouncing Trump and Christianity? Largely no. They're just too entrenched of a population. But with the younger generation watching, this is what I want to track anyway. Where is this going? Are they reforming Christianity? Are they leaving it? Or are they double down? So there's some evidence that all three are happening. Double downers are a subsection of online young men. We had a recent article, The Reactionary Religious Engagement of Young Men, in March of this year, found that young Christian men have stronger Christian nationalist views and higher levels of apocalyptic belief than their female peers. And while younger generations broadly may be leaving institutional religion, some subset of young men are doubling down in this militant, radical version of religion and national identity as their identity. And according to an April 2025 report from the Barna Group, among Gen Z men, commitment to Jesus jumped 15 percentage points between 2019 and 2025. And for millennial men, there was a similar spike of 19 percentage points. And then after Charlie Kirk's death in September 2025, many Christian nationalist activists framed him as a martyr with headlines like "White Christian Nationalism Has Its Martyr, Now What?" That was from Good Faith Media. And at his memorial, there were elements of religious revival, political rally, with young men chanting, "White men fight back," noted in the coverage. This is a place where some subset of young men are finding identity. Now, does my face look worried? No. And the reason that my face is not worried by this uptake in Christianity from young men is because churches do not run without the invisible labor of women. So you can have an uptick in young men who are going to religion for identity. Does it last? Does it last into their 40s, 50s, 60s without the invisible labor of women keeping that church going? No. No. So I'm not too worried about that uptick. Men might be the ones preaching from the stage, but it's women who are always the ones making church possible. They're the ones who are volunteering, coordinating meals, running children's ministry, teaching Sunday school, organizing events, answering phones, keeping attendance lists. They're baking the casseroles. They're the ones who set up the baptisms. They run the social media. They remember the birthdays and plan the weddings. They clean up after potlucks. They organize the potluck. They counsel other women. They're keeping the nursery staffed. They're the ones who show up when someone is sick. And churches historically cannot run without the quiet, unpaid, uncredited labor of women. And historians of religion will tell you the moment that women start leaving, institutions collapse from the inside. That's why that pastors, study after study, are panicking, not about the men leaving, because men you can bring back with the women. Men will go wherever women are. But everybody's freaking out because the women are leaving, young women especially. We already know the data that Gen Z women are the single fastest leaving demographic in American Christianity. Many aren't becoming atheists. It's just that they're refusing to serve systems that don't serve them back. And so, yeah, are some young men doubling down? Yeah, some are finding identity and purpose in the political religious fusion of Christian nationalism. But without the women, without the volunteers, without the emotional labor, without the unpaid hours, without the relational glue, there is no church. Institutions don't run on sermons. They run on the people that are keeping the lights on. And in every sense, that has always been women. And this time, women are checking out. And so when I see this spike of young men coming back to Christianity in a more, radicalized, politicalized form, I don't panic, because churches can survive without a few fiery bros on TikTok. They cannot survive without the women who actually keep the church running. So that is not a long-term win for Christianity. Then there's the reformers. So there's multiple kind of things happening in response to these cracks showing. There's the reformers, and this happens any time in history that there's institutional corruption. There'll be a movement of reform from within. And we have seen institutional acts of restitution. In this deeply symbolic move, parts of the United Methodist Church and other denominations have formally apologized for past complicity in, colonial area land theft. And a really big thing happened, the first of its kind in history. Last month, Franciscan sisters completed what they and historical observers call the first known instance of a Catholic institution returning land to a Native American tribal nation as an act of reparation. The land, which was part of their Marywood Franciscan Spirituality Center, was sold back to the Chippewa Indians for the same $30,000 that the sisters originally paid in 1966, which is about 1% of its appraised value. This story is incredible. I covered it a lot on TikTok. These sisters started with having conversations into their own religious history, and then they learned everything that had been done in the name of their church and God, specifically what happened in the Catholic missions. They were horrified. I think this was in Wisconsin. They were horrified and actually wanted to do something about it. And these badass women said, "We did this of our own conscience." This is a quote. "We did not ask for permission from Rome." That is the most badass Jesus move that I have literally heard in years. Just amazing women learning about their history, learning that they should probably do something about it, not asking for permission from the power structure, and returning the land to the indigenous communities that they were in conversation with as they were learning about their own history. Absolutely incredible story. The kind of Christianity that we love to see. We have many churches publicly repenting for, the doctrine of discovery. Major Christian bodies are kind of repudiating this idea that we get your land because we have the correct God. We have the Vatican in 2023 formally repudiating the doctrine, admitting that it did not adequately reflect the equal dignity and rights of indigenous people. And this is massive. It's Christianity rejecting one of its own foundational tools of conquest. We have Christian universities that have become surprising sites of pushback, with students and administrators publicly resisting far-right theology. An example from Wheaton College, which has been called like Evangelical Harvard, publicly distanced itself from MAGA Christianity and condemned Christian nationalism as theological malpractice. Fuller Seminary launched an entire course that tracks on dismantling white Christian nationalism. There is the Christians Against Christian Nationalism movement with over 35,000 clergy and theologians that have signed on to a national initiative explicitly rejecting Christian nationalism. So I really think that Christian nationalism in this form, in this kind of Trumpian age, has hit its peak and is on the decline. We have some reform happening from within. We have some young men doubling down, but it doesn't seem like it's likely to last. And then we have young people seeing all of this on social media and just abandoning Christianity altogether, because when Christianity went into bed with Donald Trump, you kind of, you showed the kids that we're not really going to follow Jesus on this one. Young Americans are far less likely than older generations to identify as Christian, but here's the interesting thing. This one fascinated me. A 2025 report from, again, the Barna Group, it was the State of the Church 2025, found that 66% of U.S. adults now say that they have made a personal commitment to Jesus, and that remains important. And that's up 12 points since 2021, meaning that people are leaving religion, but there's an uptick of people who say, Jesus is important to me, but I'm not finding it in church. So all of this is leading up to this question that I really wanted to ask you, which is one that I've been personally wrestling with, especially when I read this guy. I've been thinking about this question a lot. That was upside down. I've really been thinking about this. Is the best thing moving forward for us to rescue all the best parts of Christianity? And is good Christianity the best way to combat bad Christianity? Or even if Jesus was great, and even if good Christians are great, is it too problematic to keep going with this religion? And do we need it to leave it behind? Even if you love historical Jesus, and even if you love some of the parables and it helps make you a better person. Because here's my concern. Is the future that we actually want to return to a better Christianity? Like, do we just want to save the good parts, the justice, the Jesus, the love your neighbor, the protect the oppressed? Is good Christianity the best weapon that we have about bad Christianity? Or even if Christianity is great, even if the Sermon on the Mount is, great moral teachings, is Christianity too problematic of an institution? Is it too susceptible to authoritarianism that it cannot be conducive to the modern world that we want to live in? And this isn't in my notes, but it almost sounds like, when someone has wronged you, and it's like, do I give that person a second chance because I've seen such beautiful aspects and they've promised to go to therapy and they're going to be the good kind of them? Or is it so problematic that we're like, I don't want a future relationship with you because anytime that there's authoritarianism, anytime that you feel threatened, you're going to do this again. We know that you're going to do this again. Historically, this is what you do. And so do we need a bigger breakup than just like, oh, let's try to be better Christians, And this is one that I'm wrestling with. Because even if all the Christians today, like let's say we got all the Christians today on board with historical Jesus and Christian mysticism, and Christians were all just the best, most loving people you knew, and they were all Richard Rohr mystic Christians. In a few generations, the next time Christianity feels threatened, it will go right back to this. It always has, and it probably always will. When it gets threatened, Christianity and Islam are the two religions that most easily align with power. And someone said to me the other day, that's not true. They're just the biggest. They're the biggest because of this fact. They most easily align with state power. And so this isn't just an abstract question for me. It's deeply personal as I move into Christmas. The past, I would say the first couple years after deconstruction for me, as someone who has a great love of many of the aspects that I read in scripture, I did some Jesus in my home at Christmas time. I would do like the Good Samaritan, which is one of the only stories that my kids know of the Bible. I had this manger in my house where you have to do acts of kindness. And every time you do an act of kindness, it puts a piece of straw in the manger for baby Jesus. And if I may be so bold, I have given some amazing Christmas messages over the over the years. I give a lecture on the background story of the song I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day that I will get you to cry, even if you're an atheist. I do a Christmas tree and Christmas songs, and I watch this old Mormon Christmas movie called The Gift, which has some religion in it, but has a really sweet message. Like, it's the good stuff of Jesus. And I have had in the past decade, since losing my faith, I have highlighted the best aspects of Jesus and Christianity so that I can meet this holiday in a way that's authentic to me, but I can still participate in community in my extended family. So I don't do a lot of things. I certainly don't tell my kids this baby came and died for your sins or that you're broken. I certainly don't tell them that it really happened this way, literally. But I have been wondering lately if historical Jesus himself, who would be watching Christian nationalism, would have wanted us to move on and stop supporting this religion and all the harm that causes. Because every time we do this movement to rescue Christianity from itself and do the good aspects of Christianity, are we actually just lengthening the lifespan of this religion, ensuring that in the future we're going to have to do this again? We're going to have to pull Christianity back from nationalism. And it's starting to feel like this is like your best friend who keeps going to her abuser and keeps saying it's going to be different this time. And then we're always the ones that have to like pull this person back from their abusive partner, but they keep going back. Eventually you're like, maybe this is not good for you. Maybe you never talk to this guy again, right? And so as we let the boomers die and their Fox News Christianity die with them, and the rest of us have to choose between rescuing Christianity from the nationalists or just abandoning it altogether, what's best? And I can honestly say that I can prepare arguments for either side of that debate, and I could debate either side. On the one hand, are we lengthening the life of a religion that will cause harm in the future, will align with power in the future? But on the other hand, I'm worried about what fills the vacuum in America, because what is American culture without Christianity? Unless you're a Native American, American culture is Christian. We have no culture without it. We have no collective memory before Christianity. And so I do worry that worse things are going to fill that vacuum. Things like consumerism, political religions, nihilism, which can be in some ways worse than the least offensive forms of Christianity. So do we push for secular Christianity and good Christianity, good Jesus, the ways that some Jews have secularized in America, where they keep the culture, but they let go of a lot of the truth claims and the nationalism in places like New York City? Or do we tear it down and hope that we can go through the growing pains and truly become a secular society with religion behind us? So as the old guard ages out, as Christian nationalism starts to show these cracks, and as Jesus becomes more of a symbol than a shared faith, more becomes a political symbol, what do you think is worth carrying forward, if anything? Do we try to save this thing one more time, or do we let it go and see what grows in the space that it leaves behind? And let me know where you land, because whatever comes after this version of American Christianity, we are the ones that are writing this chapter. And it just feels like lately, even though I have done some good aspects of Jesus in my home, because there's a lot of Jesus that I really love, and I do want to connect with my broader family on this. It feels like Jesus now, today, the image of Jesus represents something so different than even 10 years ago, right? And so I wonder if the best way to honor Jesus today, the best way to really honor who historical Jesus may have been, is to forget him altogether. What do you think?